If you're just tuning in, this is Desert Islands, the show where I make mixtapes based on my guests' 10 records they would bring to a desert island. And today's mixtape is for Har-Di-Har. I have been a big fan of what Har-Di-Har has been doing, so I'm really excited that I could get them on the show before their curtain call. And I'm joined with them now. How are you? Thanks for coming on the show.
Woohoo!
Yeah, woohoo! Indeed.
Thank you for that sweet intro.
Yeah.
Well, so I appreciate you putting the effort to do a mixtape, just because I feel like the 10 records question is impossible. So
Yeah.
I applaud the effort. But it's been fun assembling this mixtape and listening to it. I have to ask, can you remember which album on the list came into your life first?
Are you individually or collectively?
Ooh. Okay. That's a good question. That's a good question. Do you have answers for both? That's the
Yes.
follow-up.
Oh, yeah.
We do.
All right. Well, why don't we do individually?
Okay. My first one on there would be Joni Mitchell, Court and Spark.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which I came to ridiculously late in life. I think I was
Really?
I was like a sophomore in college when I first heard of Joni Mitchell. I'd like never heard of her before.
I have a confession. I didn't get into Joni full on until right around college too. So like it's once that door opens though, I feel like it's it's a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Andrew?
Yeah, mine was Paul Simon's Graceland.
Nice.
My parents loved that record, and I think I listened to it all throughout my childhood, on drives, cleaning the house, stuff like that.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
And then I didn't realize how good of a record it was until later when I was like listening to records closely.
I agree with you on, like, because Graceland was one of those records that was kind of ever present, and I don't think I gave it its due until I could like kind of grow up and appreciate it. And a lot of those records too, I feel like, especially when it's either your parents' music or stuff that was kind of like introduced to you by some elder in your life, there's like this weird feeling that it's already part of this weird pantheon where it's just like, well, I mean, of course this is good music. They're like legendary, like there's a lot of records that like inspired me to fall in love with music, but I wouldn't say like John Coltrane's A Love Supreme had me thinking, yeah, I could probably do that. Is there a record, and it doesn't have to be on this list, but is there a record or artist that had something click for you where you said, I need to start doing this. I think I can do this, and in fact, I should be doing this.
Yeah. This is a good question too. Because also it's like individual and collective. I mean,
well, yeah, I mean, is there a record that formed this band? Because that would be interesting, because that doesn't happen too often. But like, as far as like, what were your inspirations to start creating music yourselves? Individually or collectively?
We kind of got into Dirty Projectors around the same time that we started Har-Di-Har. And I think that was, obviously our music you can't replicate Dirty Projectors, but that was a big influence on us. Maybe Beach House too.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And like for me individually, I don't know. I'm old, so I think like Regina Spektor was really big.
Oh yeah.
Imogen Heap, just those really powerhouse women, singer-songwriters of the early aughts.
Yeah, for me, I was studying jazz really intensely at the University of Northern Iowa, and I was just submersed in sort of like experimental free jazz and things like that.
Really? Yeah.
And then I, when I heard Grizzly Bear and doing, incorporating free jazz elements into this like, freak folk thing.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's like what made me be like, oh man, I want to do this. I love songs, but I also love jazz. So maybe I could do both.
I can feel that in all of your music too. Like there are these textures and influences, and we might as well get the elephant out of the room, just because most bands don't get a say in when their run ends, and you are choosing to end yours. So how did you come to this decision? I know why is kind of a big, harsh question, but why? Why now?
Well, I will say that the way that we put it was that this is the end of Har-Di-Har as we know it.
Sure. Yeah.
So it may make a comeback as something totally different.
So we're not like cutting it off completely.
Right.
And, like
right.
we're we're leaving the door open to some degree.
But just different, yeah, something different. And I think another caveat too, like no one knows that after every record cycle that we have, we talk about ending Har-Di-Har because it's we're together as a non-musical entity too,
Right.
and it has been very hard on our relation. Record cycles are hard enough for bands to go through that process.
Oh, yeah.
So always at the end, we're like, this did a number on a relationship. Maybe we should not do it anymore. But we basically just at the end of our last record cycle, it was conveniently COVID. I don't want to say lightly COVID, but we were done with touring for the record. And we were kind of going into the writing cycle again, and it was good to us because we, used that time and space to write new material. We also had pretty large transformation individually at that time in our lives, and so the music that we were writing was different, and ultimately a lot changing in our lives. So we just determined that it would be better to start, I don't know, it's such a complicated question because Har-Di-Har represents a lot of our our old ways of thinking about life, and symbolically it just felt like the right thing to kind of end it. To have this be the last one.
So was that your mindset going in of just like, you know what, I feel like we have grown into a new direction, this isn't suiting us anymore? Or is it just like, we should just give this one final send off and like end the sentence in a way that we feel is right?
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's a lot of the themes of what we've written about is our personal relationship with one another.
Sure. Yeah.
And part of it isn't saying that we don't have things to write about in that regard anymore, because we do. I think there will always be ways that we could write about our relationship. But one of the things that we're very interested in is actually creating art that's about our faith and spiritual purposes.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Which we weren't able to do that in a way with Har-Di-Har that I think we wanted to.
Sure.
Which is alluding to this new project.
Yeah. And I think we could, we've played around with well, we could just kind of repurpose Har-Di-Har, and who cares? You can write about whatever you want to. You don't, it's not that we only can write about our relationship. But again, I just think symbolically, we just coming out, and probably there are a lot of artists that this happened to during COVID, but when you all of a sudden can't go to shows, you start to realize, why was I going to shows? And what's missing, and these relationships are stunted and all these things. And it just, there's a lot of clarity, and I think conviction too, of being honest with ourselves of what our motivation was in doing music and in playing shows and in going to shows, and a lot of selfish ambition, and that is it's hard to put to put new wine in old wine skins, to use that metaphor. And so it just seemed easier for us to, or not easier, it just seemed like, let's do a good send off. Har-Di-Har, we had these songs written already, let's do them, let's put them out, and then let's put it to the side and move on to something new.
And did you work with Brett Bouillon on this record as well?
We did, yeah. He didn't
mixing.
He mixed it. He's the mixing engineer.
Yeah,
we engineered it here in this studio, and then the drums were recorded at Shane Leonard's studio in Eau Claire, and he engineered the drums on the record.
Oh, yeah.
So
this is not the first time you've worked with him, right?
No, yeah, I've worked with him for years and playing with J.E. Sunday.
With Shane.
With Shane, yeah.
With Brett, we did our last record with Brett.
Yeah. Yep.
Brett is in a weird way, I kind of feel like he has like this Bob Ross like quality of just like working with him is so calming, and just like when you're with him, the ideas flow, and just like, yeah, we could probably just double that synth line right there, just like a happy little synth line, and like I feel like when I worked with him on the LPF project, I felt like I didn't just learn something about music. I felt like I learned something about like friendship and like companionship. And like it's just like a really wholesome experience. But he also does great work. I feel like everything coming out of that little orbit sounds great, especially J.E. Sunday and Daredevil Christopher Wright. Was he ever involved in that? Or
no, Brett never mixed or worked with John, but I know that he wants to, and I know John is interested in that, so maybe that'll happen someday.
Ooh, all right. Man, I remember seeing them at the 400 bar. Since we're talking about time. Okay, speaking of time though, when will your final record be available?
I think sometime
it's April.
We don't have the final date. I think it's like mid-April.
So like a month from now, we're putting out a single on Friday, this Friday, another single from the record that Shane is featured on as well with drums. And then the rest of the EP comes out a month from now for, listening and the like.
Yeah. So yeah, we've produced 5 videos that are quasi music videos, but not really. If that makes sense. That correspond with all the songs that we'll be releasing as well after that.
And so we will be listening to the single, the first single you actually let loose in a bit, but you have hinted at a new musical project, or at least doors opening for this one. Are we ready to talk about this, or am I like pressing for trade secrets here?
Ready, not ready. Yes, both.
Yes, no. What was the question? Who am I? Where am I? So, what's like? Is there? I guess you obviously have to go through the task of releasing this record. But are there plans on the horizon for a reveal, or is this more of just like, hey, because you were examining your own priorities? It's just like, you know what? I think we're just gonna do this for us. Because the ambition is something I struggled with in the pandemic, of just like, yeah, I like goal setting. I think it's a healthy thing to do as an individual, but like there is that weird thing where it gets pushed into a direction that isn't always healthy.
It's like
so I continue. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, no, it like totally dogs you, that little voice. Even so, it's a constant battle for sure. We do have something in the works. We are working on it. But we also are going to have more of a grand reveal a bit later. But we can talk generally about it.
Yeah, we are moving to trying to just like write and record music and produce videos of it.
Great.
As opposed to necessarily performing, though we're not also closing the door on performing. We're just focusing on a video format.
Absolutely.
The audio and video format of it. And we want to be producing songs for the project on a relatively frequent basis. That's the goal of it.
And ultimately, like our thrust, and I made mention to this earlier, like we want to be single-minded in our thrust, being like spiritually themed. That's super important to us. And I think now in this time that we live in, an important topic of conversation. So that's another big change with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it will be a different project. It will not be Har-Di-Har. It will be a different
Sure. Yeah. Well, speaking of performing in Har-Di-Har, will you be announcing more performances with Har-Di-Har, or is this just kind of like, hey, this is it. Get it while you can.
We have made this available to anyone that wants to hear it whenever they want to,
Sure.
on the internet, or at least we will when it's released. We haven't made any specific plans to perform.
No worries, no worries. Well, if folks
leave it that way. Yeah.
Well, if we're about to hear the first single you release off of this upcoming record. If folks like what they hear, where can they hear it again? Is there a
Well, your
preferred
major
place? There you go.
Yeah.
If you feel like supporting us in the ways of money, then Bandcamp is always the best. But
Yes.
but any streaming service is just fine. You know, whatever you do to listen to music, we're not concerned about making money. So
Yep. The videos will be on YouTube, and then all of the stuff will be available on streaming services. It's not going to be on physical medium. But yeah.
That being said, if you would like to purchase a vinyl record of our last record,
we've got lots of those left. We're going to put them on sale, I think, at some point.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show
Thank
today.
you.
I'm really excited I could get you on this show, and I'm really excited to hear the full record in April. But in the meantime, here is I Am For You by Har-Di-Har here on Desert Islands.